Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the University of Central Florida Department of Criminal Justice, and I'd like to take a little bit of time today and talk about a fascinating article written by Ian G.R. Shaw titled Robot Wars, U.S. Empire and the Geopolitics in the Robotic Age, published in the online first 2017 edition of the journal Security Dialogue. And we have Security Dialogue through the UCF online library, so you all are very welcome to get that article and a whole bunch of other excellent articles in the Security Dialogue journal. So here we start talking about, or Professor Shaw talks about robotics and how this begins to relate to military strategies and political power at an international level, and about the army of robots of the future and how this changes things. And Professor Shaw talks about three major areas of this power, and these involve swarm wars, robo-world, and the autogenic battle site. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But basically, when we start thinking about robots, what we begin to see is that robots can do a lot more now than in the past, and in the future they'll be able to do a lot more than they're doing now. And so what is a robot, first of all? And Shaw on page 2 defines robot basically as a computer programmable machine capable of automatic actions. And so we know this robotic revolution has been growing very rapidly, and things have started to change dramatically. And one of the things we're seeing is that those that have the high-tech robotics will have global power in the world system. And so this robotic revolution is very much embedded in the military and in different organizations that use robotics for a variety of defense purposes. So we're obviously in the robotic age and have been for a while. And one of the interesting features that Shaw talks about is the use of drones and robots, basically in conflicts and in warfare. And so we see this as something that is being looked at as a methodology of warfare, but also looking at what are risks to those that are on the receiving end of a robotic attack. And there have been cases of robots injuring or killing people, but I know a lot of times people say, well, it's not the robot, it's the person who programmed the robot. But the big question would be, well, if someone can program a robot to do certain tasks, and obviously we might get into a debate on who's responsible or not responsible. You get into the situation where someone programs a robot to do something to help people, and it actually ends up harming people. Is that person responsible? What was their intent versus what was their motive? What was the outcome? So we have a lot of legal aspects to deal with as well. And so now we get into that scenario, and obviously there's a lot going on in military and defense related to all this. I mentioned briefly I once went to, I actually presented at an international terrorism seminar, and I think I was the only one there that didn't have some kind of physical product or simulation or something to show that. There's a lot of military vendors there, and I was there with my violentization theory risk assessment using sociological theory. And a lot of people came by, and I think they appreciated having in the rooms where you had all this high-tech stuff, someone just talking about social theory. And I think that's a big part that's missing, and I think we can start to integrate the whole idea of profiling robotic crimes, profiling high-tech crimes, and beginning to put that into a social, psychological, theoretical perspective as well, and using those tools and advancing those tools we have in profiling to actually take a closer look at this. Not necessarily with the military, but just around. For example, I might ask have you seen any drones in your neighborhood? I can tell you the realtors or the real estate companies fly drones around basically to film houses that are for sale and then put up real fancy videos about the house. Here's a house and a beautiful lake and 6-car garage and a stable for cows and horses and so on and so on. And it looks really nice and everything, and we say, wow, that's really neat. But is there a misuse of that particular drone perhaps? Well, obviously if someone flies it into someone, which has happened before when, filming at weddings and things like that, there have been mishaps in that regard. And, I wasn't filming and did that, but I've read about that. People, the photographer had a drone and it hit the groom's, friends or whatever. And so, those things can happen, but we're getting into a much more complex area here. For example, with swarm wars. Shaw defines a swarm war as a group of autonomous networked small unmanned aircraft systems operating collaboratively to achieve a common objectives. So here we're not talking about a drone, we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of drones with weapons flying in at different times or the same time or from different directions. And when you think about that, you can see how that would definitely change the nature of conflict. This type of technology is not that expensive in the scheme of things as well. And of course, that there's the push to build better drones, more powerful drones, more high-tech drones, smaller drones, or larger drones carrying larger payloads, whatever the case might be. Even we start hearing about, I saw a flying police car demonstration on a video the other day. I think it was coming out of, I'm not sure where it was coming out of. I want to say Dubai, and the police officer actually got in this almost helicopter-like device for one and could get from one place to another rapidly. And so, I think that's going to be the norm in the near future. And so next we have this whole idea of robo world, where we actually have robots who engage in combat. And so you have the drone surveillance and drone weaponry, and now you have on the ground maybe, or in the sea or whatever the case might be, you have these robots. And that could look like some of the robots we're familiar with, or it could be some robots that are put together in very, very different ways. And then the autogenic battle site is where humans are no longer really on the ground, but you have autonomous drones and robots and other high-tech devices that end up engaging in warfare. And some of this also may be related to adding on biological components as well. And so this brings us a whole new area in that regard. And what I'd like to mention also, and take this another step, another area, are nano weapons. And this book by Louis A. Del Monte, Nano Weapons, A Growing Threat to Humanity. I wish it was a science fiction book, but this talks about things getting smaller and smaller, so we can't even see anymore what could be very dangerous or deadly to hundreds and thousands of people. So when we start talking about swarms, we move from drones to much smaller flying objects to even ones we may not be able to see, carrying payloads that could be very deadly to hundreds or thousands or millions of people. So the technology is moving very fast, and we want to go ahead and think about how we use some of our criminal profiling strategies, techniques, and theories and ideas and move that. I don't claim to have a vast understanding of the intricate nature of the technology, the engineering, the robotics, the programming, but I do know we need a social psychological component to add to that, and I think that we can help add to the discussion with our profiling models and ideas, and to bring those up to date as well in the nano technology weapon area. And this wraps up this video. Thank you.